Hello, I'm Brigantia, Blackbird of Blackbird's Brew. Happy Monday. It's time to take another look at the goddess Frigga, and today we're going to be looking at her in the domestic realm. So first we're going to be looking at her in her role as the wife of Odin. Then next, how she was the mother of Baldur and some of the issues associated with that. And then lastly, we'll hear a few ideas that I gleaned from modern-day Frigga devotees about how she can be helpful and how to approach her in household affairs. So first, as the wife of Odin. Generally, she is described as the ideal wife, but what does that mean, specifically on Norse terms? This is where cultural context does become more important. So I did a little bit of digging, and women in the Norse eras, particularly the Viking eras, their lives tended to be centered around the home and around the farm. Men would go off for trade or for raiding and pillaging. And while they were gone, the women were responsible for not only just carrying on the affairs of the farm and the community without them, but also to ensure the success of the harvest and the well-being of the family in general. And that would include even physical defense if the occasion called for it. A lot of the more commonplace duties included housekeeping, cookery, working wool, spinning yarn, sewing, weaving, caretaking of children and elderly family members. Others were craftswomen, particularly if they lived in town, and usually this was in the textiles industry. And they would engage in this commerce, and it would help sustain the family. So these were not passive women. That was very hard work. There was a lot to keep track of, and of course, you didn't have any of the modern conveniences we do today. So these were some pretty hardy women. So if you look at this in the context of what would it mean for Frigga to be the ideal wife, you could see how she would be an active participant in a wide variety of events, as well as being associated with household duties that women of the time would have been very, very familiar with. Now, when it comes to more of the official affairs, arbitrating between different warring parties, there's one story in which Frigga was disputing with Odin. Two tribes were at war. He wanted one side to win, she wanted the other side to win, and finally, they were just going round and round, and Odin said, well, whichever camp he saw first in the morning, that would be the one who would be granted victory by him. Well, on his side of the bed, outside his window, that's where the tribe he favored was going to be, so he thought, I've got this in the bag. And, I'll win, and, basically she won't say anything more about it. Well, through a bit of trickery, Frigga ensured that Odin saw the tribe that she favored that next morning, and thus they were victorious in the conflict. But be it gods or men, husbands sometimes cannot be reasoned with, and so we wives, we are forced to just outmaneuver them. And that's exactly what Frigga did here. And later on, Odin did admit that she was right. And, sometimes, yes, it's manipulative, but sometimes a straightforward approach just doesn't lead to success. So we have to kind of go around, we cajole, we arrange things to put the odds in our favor, and, right or wrong, it's a reality of life, and it has been going on long enough that we even see this pattern in mythology itself. So, also in the context of Frigga being the wife of Odin, is that she was the keeper of the keys. Keys have a lot of symbolic meaning. First, certainly they are symbolic of the housewife, the person who has access to anything and everything to do with the home and makes decisions accordingly. And this ranges, from everyday life, going through the usual grind kind of decisions to acknowledging important rites of passages. As the children are growing up, when they enter into adolescence, and then when they're on the threshold of adulthood, and then when the kids get married, and then suddenly mom is a really involved grandmother. The keys to that family all reside within the housewife and within her heart, within her soul. The acknowledging of this progression through life is actually one of the duties of motherhood itself. Keys are also a symbol of witchcraft, magic, and knowledge. They can metaphorically unlock our minds and unlock our talents, and with that we can open up doors, we can delve into new things, we can make new connections, and we can become better practitioners. I actually have an antique key on my altar, and it serves no practical purpose, but it's what it represents of the key to knowledge, the key to the next stage of my spiritual development. Keys also have a strong association with Frigga. She was known to have a ring of keys tied to her waist. This not only represented her authority over the household, both her own and Odin's, but it was also linked with her magical capabilities. They are a manifestation of her power and a visual reminder of who she is and who's in charge. There's also an aspect of sovereignty at play here. Now, Frigga as the mother of Baldur. Baldur was one of Frigga's son. He was a god of the light, a god of the sun, and he then, at some point in his life, began having premonitions of his death. Well, his mother heard about this, and she swiftly took action. She went to every living thing in creation, and she made them swear oaths to never harm Baldur. And the only being that did not swear this was the mistletoe. Now, there's disagreement in the accounts. I'm pretty sure I say something like that at least once a video about these Norse deities. But opinions vary as to whether this was because the mistletoe was considered too insignificant to make an oath or too young to swear an oath. But nevertheless, whatever it was, the plant was overlooked. That in of itself is a lesson that leaving details unattended can be disastrous and have long-reaching consequences. So after the oaths, and Baldur's now in a position of invincibility and can't be injured, can't be killed, so the rest of the gods decided it would be a really fun game to throw weapons at him to see what happens. I'm confident that alcohol was involved in the creation of this game. How could it not be? And this is where we enter Loki, who in the myth discovers that mistletoe alone has the power to harm Baldur. He then crafts a spear out of mistletoe, or in other stories, a sprig of mistletoe is tied around a spear. And then he goes to the god Hodor, who was blind and Baldur's brother. And Loki said that Hodor must feel kind of left out of everything. And he said, you know what, I'll help you with this. That way you can participate in the game. And he gives him Hodor the spear, and then Loki guides his hand. And then the spear goes straight through, and Baldur died immediately. Now, naturally, Frigga is beside herself, as any mother would be, and she immediately tries to find a way to ransom Baldur from the goddess Hel so that he can be restored to life and this horrible thing can be righted. Now, Hermod, who was another son of Odin, he volunteered to go and negotiate with Hel. And when he got down there and he saw her on her throne, he also saw Baldur sitting on a seat of honor next to her. So, make of that what you will. Hermod asked Hel to release his brother, stating that he was absolutely beloved by everyone and it was such a huge loss to the world, they had to have him back. Hel then decreed that she would release Baldur if every being in creation, and I think also every being who is dead, again, that's another point where the stories I was reading varies, but if everyone would weep for him. And everything did, except for a single giant, and I've seen this giant's name being named different things. The one I found was Thok, and because Thok would not weep, Hel kept Baldur exactly where he was. It is widely believed that this giant, whatever its name actually was Loki in disguise. Now we know that the Norse were great believers in fate, and the lesson I take away from this story, without getting involved about who did what and all the whys and wherefores, but the real lesson that I think that can be taken from this story is that death is inevitable. No one is immune, and death is not to be mocked. With the O's trying to protect Baldur, as well-meaning as they were, even that was not sufficient to make him completely immune from death. And the way that game was, of, throwing things at him, it's like, that didn't get him either. In a way, that is mocking death. That's showing a careless disregard for safety. There's something to think about there. Another lesson from this is that even a mother's love cannot stave off the certainty of death for forever. Frigg went to great lengths to protect her son. Most mothers go to profound measures to protect their children. It is just this primal, ferocious force. But no matter how much a mother might love her child, or how much any of us might love another person, we can't arrange things to where they never die. And that's a weighty thing to come to terms with, that even love has limitations as to its power. Now, on to something a little less gloomy. Let's look about a few things that people had to say about working with Frigga within their households and just for general magic. Now, I have yet to attempt to work with Frigga. I kind of have my hands full with Loki at the moment, but I have been reading articles and watching videos about other people's practices and experiences. One of the common themes I came across was that there was a need to keep your home clean and yourself clean, just as clean as possible, both physically and spiritually, and also for things to be tidy and orderly. Um, Other practitioners stated that for Frigga's shrines and altars that they like to use pale blue, white colors. She's a sky goddess, and this is meant to reflect that. But this isn't a universal practice, and it was presented more so as the personal preference of those practitioners rather than an overarching requirement of the goddess herself. So, if you are wanting to work with Frigga, ask. See if you get a nudge one way or another. Start setting up a shrine, and if you feel like, yeah, that doesn't look quite right, then you begin making adjustments. But use your best judgment. Other practitioners, they took up different forms of weaving and needlework. This was to emulate Frigga's skills, also to demonstrate domestic competency. And also, it was a way to create offerings for Frigga in rituals that they would have later on. So it was all kind of feeding in together. Frigga is very family oriented, as we covered earlier. Several devotees spoke about the importance of building up the family, being a peace member whenever there was a disagreement, and helping people who need to get their households in order. Obviously not without not without that person's agreement, but being of service to other people in this very neighborly, communal kind of way. Also, comforting the sick, comforting people who are grieving the loss of a loved one, working with children in any way. Charity work that benefits families, children, and women are viewed as suitable offerings to Frigga, especially if it involves teaching skills to others. Because, of course, if you teach people skills, then they are better able to look after themselves, and they can manage their own affairs more effectively, and they can then in turn teach others. And it's this nice cycle that can get started that some devotees of Frigga like to get involved in. So, whether any of us choose to actively work with Frigga or not, it is beyond dispute that she exemplifies what a matriarch can be. And this is something we can aspire to. She embodies female sovereignty, power without having to pick up a sword or emulate men in any way. And there are so many portrayals of women. This is where they really fall short and the rubber hits the road. The strong woman who we see in modern fiction, whether it's in books or TV or movies, whatever. It's always a masculine woman, not a feminine woman. It's someone who has rejected her femininity and is essentially just a man with boobs. This utterly contradicts and defeats the point of showing an example of feminine strength and power. If anything, it's really bad messaging. It's saying that, well, in order to be powerful and strong, you have to be just like the other gender. No, we don't. We do not have to think like men, act like men, or dress like men in order to be strong and powerful and fully develop these traits within ourselves. The idea that we do is it reinforces that ridiculous assumption that women are weak. I mean, please. Women go through childbirth. That's not something that some weak ninny could possibly do and get through. But that's part of the female experience. That in of itself shows strength and power. And when we look at Frigga, even when we're just looking at her strictly through this domestic lens, we can see that she is anything but weak. So there's a lot to unpack here, a lot to think about. I'd love to hear further discussion about this. You are very welcome to join us at Blackbird's Brew on Discord. There will be a link in the description box below. Also, if you have not already, please subscribe to this channel, give the video a like, leave a comment should the spirit move you. There's lots more to come on Frigga this month, and I hope you will come back for that. But I think that's it for now, so bye.